I've veneered over an existing concrete block retaining wall with veneered brick. If you want to learn how we did it, keep on watching. Let's get started.
This retaining wall has certainly gone through quite the transformation throughout the year. It was an old rundown rock retaining wall that I completely gutted and transformed with a concrete cement block retaining wall. I did everything I needed to make sure that this retaining wall lasts a lifetime. However, the overall aesthetic with this retaining wall is nice, but not what I want for this project.
So this is our retaining wall that we just built. However, there's so much going on in this driveway between different stones and rock. We have the brick veneer that's on the house. We have on the opposite side of this driveway a large rock retaining wall, and then we have this concrete block retaining wall as well. And in order to simplify the aesthetics of this driveway, we're actually going to make this retaining wall look a bit more like this, with the same brick veneer that I picked up at Lowe's. So we're gonna be placing this right on top of the brick, and you be the judge on whether you like the aesthetic or not. It's something unique, it's something different. I'm always wanting to try new things, so you be the judge at the tail end of this video and let me know what you personally think of the transformation.
Now I'm trying to make this project very DIY friendly, and in order to do so, we're skipping a scratch coat segment of this project, which would be more traditional for a veneer brick like this in an exterior element. But instead of doing that, we're going to save a whole bunch of time by applying a concrete polymer adhesive. Now this is a product from Quikrete, and it is specifically designed for masonry work, especially in exterior elements. The veneer brick is placed right on the face of our concrete retaining wall blocks, and the nice thing is, this retaining wall block is perfectly flat except for the very edges of the block. It's at a 45-degree angle, but that's fine because the face of our blocks are still consistently flat all the way across. Now this adhesive has an extremely strong bond, however, I want to guarantee that none of these pieces are going to move on us over time, so that's where I bring in these horseshoe shims. These shims are designed for interior tile work, however, this is basically just exterior tile work from my perspective. Now this first row was a bit more difficult than all the rest because I'm working off of our asphalt driveway, and that's uneven in comparison to our beautiful retaining wall, which gets a lot easier once you get to that second level. In order to match the same overall aesthetic on the house, I'm still consistently going with a running bond pattern, which doesn't add any extra strength in this circumstance, but certainly more eye appealing. The really nice thing about these shims is that they're so large, I'm able to stack them quite easily, and because each one of these shims is an 1/8 inch thick, I can stack multiple together and make a cohesive large grout line, which is consistent with the grout line that we have on the house. The only problem is that I wasn't quite prepared for the weather when I started this project. Should have looked at the forecast.
Okay, yeah. Might be time to go inside or start this up again tomorrow. Yeah.
Luckily for me, it was a much drier day the next day, even though it was still a bit rainy, but that's fine as long as it's not raining on our brick as we're installing it. In a perfect world, our brick veneer on our retaining wall would match and line up with the brick veneer on the house, but because we're working off an existing retaining wall, I can't do that due to the stepping pattern of the concrete retaining wall blocks. But because we're applying our veneered brick to our second row of retaining wall block, it's a much faster process because we're already working off of something that's perfectly level since we did that a mere couple of months ago. At this point in time, I want to say a huge and special thank you to the sponsor of this week's video, Lowe's. They're a brand that I've personally used, known, and trusted for years, and the fact that they are actually diligently working with content creators like myself means a great deal to me, and one that I'm proud to be a part of. We wanted to team up on a project that was not only DIY friendly, but affordable and can be done year round. All the tools and materials seen in this video can be purchased at Lowe's, and I have a link in the description box of this video that has all the products featured in this project. Lowe's is also a part of YouTube Shopping, so I will make sure that there are links for those items here at YouTube also, or of course at Lowe's stores or at lowes.com. With all of the full pieces of brick veneer installed, we can make our way to the brick that needs to be cut to the appropriate size. The easiest way to cut this brick in a precise fashion is to take my angle grinder with a diamond blade, which makes quick work of the cutting process. These pieces are then cut and laid in position and are quite straightforward. What's not so straightforward are the pieces that we're going to have to cut at an angle due to the elevation of our driveway. It's certainly not super complicated, but I do want these pieces below the grade of our driveway because I want to make sure we have a seamless look once it's all said and done. This is definitely where that bond strength came in extremely handy with that quick-crete adhesive, because it was quite difficult to get those shims into the correct position and making sure those pieces stayed put. But luckily, they really weren't sliding around much thanks to the bond strength and the copious amount of unusually placed shims. At the tail end of our retaining wall, we do have a slight bend to it, and that does make things a little bit more challenging at this location, but after I get my full pieces in place, the one pivot point is where the retaining wall block is turning, and that means that I have to cut some of these pieces in half and pivot them at the correct angle. In all honesty, this really wasn't a big deal, and I just applied a bit of a heftier bead of sealant on the backside to make sure we had a bit of give in order for those two pieces to align properly. I let our veneered stone dry overnight, and I came back to the next day to remove all of our shims. Once all of our shims were removed, it's time for grout. When I'm mixing concrete thin set, or in this case, mortar mix, I always make sure and pour my water first into the bucket. That way, it reduces the chances of having dry spots at the very bottom of your bucket, much easier to mix up. And in this application, I actually mixed it up a little too dry at first, but still not a big issue with the small amount of mortar mix that I'm using here. And I'm just adding a bit of extra moisture as I'm mixing it to get the right consistency. And when it comes to grout, consistency is key because we're going to be putting this into a grout bag, and this stuff needs to be at a perfect consistency, because if it's too stiff, it's not going to go through the bag evenly and it's just going to clog up on you. If it's too wet, it's just going to be a mess and it's not going to have the longevity that grout should have. In all honesty, this is just more of a delicate balance, and you'll be able to figure out one way or the other if it's too wet or too loose just by you squeezing it out of the bag. You should have a consistent bead coming through with very little clogs along the way. If you're having too many clogs, you're going to have to remove said grout out of your bag, add a bit more moisture to your mix, and then fill up your bag again and see if it flows more evenly. There is one main obstacle in our way with grouting, and that is unfortunately the fact that this is a tiered retaining wall that we're applying our veneer to. So in order to cover up those seams within our brick, we need to make sure we have a consistent edge across those seams. That's where our metal flashing comes into play, because we're going to be applying the same adhesive on the back side of this tier and then slip our metal flashing right in between those seams. This is going to help prevent moisture from building up behind our veneered brick, and hopefully gives us a nice finished look, because if you didn't have this there, then you'd be able to see the top portion of the veneer brick, which would take away from the illusion of this being a solid brick, which is what we really want in this application. With one row of metal flashing accounted for, I proceed with my grouting up to the third row of the retaining wall block and lay in my next piece of metal flashing. But in this application, our metal flashing is not long enough, and therefore we are going to have to slice two pieces of this metal trim together. Just keep in mind that you do want to apply a bit of adhesive in between those two seams, but also know that you do want this metal to be pointed somewhat downward at a downward angle so moisture doesn't get trapped on that ledge. The tool that I have in my hand here is called a steel brick jointer, and it basically just provides you an easy way to smooth out your grout lines in an even fashion. Now there's two sides to this tool. One side is at a 1/2 inch and the other side is at 3/8. This basically just provides you two different grout size options, which really comes in handy in an application like this because we have a different size grout joints depending on how the brick is laid out between each row. I of course clean off our metal flashing after our grout is smooth and proceed to the next row. A simple straight cut on one side of our metal flashing makes it very easy to bend around corners such as this. The only real difficulty when trying to maneuver around these areas was that I wanted to make sure that these pieces of metal trim stayed in place and adhered properly with the adhesive below it. In order to do that, I inserted a few shims into specific locations to guarantee that those pieces of metal were adhered and sitting directly into that adhesive. That way I could let the adhesive dry while knowing that the metal trim won't be moving, and I could proceed with grouting the remainder of our wall. I'm slightly pulling forward our top cap in this section because I want it to be right above our veneered brick, and therefore I don't have to apply another layer of metal flashing. This way I quickly finish up our grout lines and let it dry overnight. Come back to it the next day, clean it up slightly, and of course in those sections where I have our shims, I remove those and apply a bit more grout into those seams in order to make sure we have a properly sealed and consistent grout line all the way across. With our grout lines now taken care of, we are not quite done yet, because with this being right next to my asphalt driveway, there is a bit of asphalt that needs to be repaired. One product that I've been really wanting to use over the last year was this aqua patch. I saw this at a recent trade show earlier this year, and it is a asphalt patch where it has a binder that's built into it, and it binds and adheres when water is applied to it. That's what makes it so unique, because the binder is not a flame or heat, it is literally just a chemical reaction once there's moisture applied to the product. You do want to still tamp it down thoroughly, but once done, I pour a vigorous amount of water on this area and let it cure. This aquafalt is really nice because the granulars that are in this product are quite small, so you're able to get into small crevices that you probably wouldn't be able to get into properly if it was just a regular asphalt mix. But now that we're done with asphalt, we are done with this amazing transformation. I'm personally much happier with the overall look and aesthetic of this retaining wall now. From what it was originally to what it is now is truly amazing, and I feel it truly complements the area within the driveway space, from the similarities to the brick and the white trim accents. Now, it's your turn to judge whether you like it or not, so let me know in the comment section what you thought of this final transformation. But no matter what you say, I still think this is truly one beautiful, sexy beast of a veneered retaining wall. Oh yeah,